You're going about your day, nothing unusual, just your regular errands or maybe a chat with a friend, and suddenly out of nowhere you're on the verge of tears or ready to bite someone's head off. And then comes the guilt. Why did I react like that? That wasn't me. Sound familiar? If you've been having mood swings that feel completely out of character, you're not broken, unstable, or losing your mind. You're simply riding the hormonal roller coaster known as menopause. And no, you're not alone. Here's what no one tells you. These emotional shifts aren't just about feeling a bit off. Sometimes it's rage that flares up from nowhere. Other times it's a deep, heavy sadness that wraps around you like a thick coat, even when nothing's actually wrong. It can hit while you're driving, cooking, or even laughing. Then suddenly you feel completely flat. These aren't just moods. It's your brain trying to recalibrate while your hormones are playing a chaotic symphony in the background. Estrogen, that powerful hormone we barely paid attention to in our 20s, plays a major role in regulating serotonin and dopamine, the very chemicals that control our mood and emotional stability. So when estrogen drops, it's not just about hot flushes and irregular periods. It's your emotional core that's impacted. But what's even more maddening? The unpredictability. One day you're calm and rational. The next, the smallest thing sets you off. And let's be honest, it doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you, especially when you can't even explain what's happening yourself. But it goes deeper. There's a loneliness in all this that doesn't get talked about enough, because emotional volatility is invisible. No one sees the inner storm. On the outside, you hold it together. Inside, you're questioning everything. Why can't I control my temper? Why does everything feel so overwhelming? Why am I crying over a toothpaste advert? These aren't overreactions. They're echoes of a system in transition, a system struggling to find a new balance while the world expects you to keep being the glue that holds everything together. And let's not forget the shame. Women are expected to be emotionally steady, nurturing, and composed. So when we lose that composure, we're judged, or worse, we judge ourselves. But imagine this. What if you allowed yourself to see these changes not as failures but as signals? Signals that your body is undergoing a major transformation. Signals that it's time to slow down, reconnect, and rethink how you care for yourself. Some women describe it like this. I don't recognize myself anymore. And that loss of identity can be terrifying. You used to be patient, right? You were the one who fixed things, not the one slamming doors. But here's something you rarely hear. This emotional turbulence isn't a sign you're falling apart. It's a sign your brain chemistry is shifting in response to hormonal withdrawal. It's biology, not weakness. And yes, there's science behind it. Recent studies show that the brain regions responsible for emotional regulation, like the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, are directly affected by estrogen levels. When those levels drop, our ability to manage emotions takes a hit. Imagine trying to drive through a storm with no working wipers. You're still the same driver, the road's still there, but the visibility, it's a mess. Here's where it gets really frustrating. Many doctors still overlook it. They talk about hot flushes, maybe sleep problems. But your mood? You're often told to just try to relax or worse. Handed an antidepressant without even exploring the root cause. That disconnect between what you feel and what you're told adds another layer of frustration and isolation. And when those around you don't get it either, you start to question your own sanity. Sometimes it's the smallest things that unravel you. Someone leaves crumbs on the counter, a message goes unanswered, a last-minute change of plans. Things that never used to bother you suddenly feel like personal attacks. You're not being dramatic. Your emotional bandwidth is maxed out. And let's not even get started on the emotional whiplash of feeling fine one moment and crying in the bathroom 5 minutes later. You're not going mad. You're dealing with menopause in a world that barely understands what that even means. And if you've made it this far, it's probably because somewhere in the back of your mind you're wondering, why do I feel like this when nothing's actually happened? That's one of the cruelest traps of mood swings during menopause. There's no obvious trigger, no argument, no bad news, yet you wake up with a heavy sadness, a sharp irritability, or an unexplainable emptiness. And there you are, trying to find logic in something that doesn't have an external cause. It's exhausting, it's isolating, But you're not crazy. You're not failing. You're moving through a powerful transition that directly impacts your emotional chemistry. The hormonal shifts during this phase deeply alter the way your brain processes emotion. Estrogen, that silent ally we took for granted for years, is in free fall, and along with it, your serotonin and dopamine levels are also dropping. These are the same brain chemicals that keep you steady, upbeat, and resilient in the face of everyday stress. What does this look like in real life? It means something that made you laugh yesterday might bring you to tears today. A throwaway comment from your partner might suddenly feel like a direct attack. A quiet moment from your kids might echo like rejection. And the worst part is, you often can't explain it, not even to yourself. One of the least talked about and most painful parts of all this is how these emotional changes impact your relationships. Many women say they no longer recognize the version of themselves who snaps without warning, who retreats into a room with no desire to speak, or who breaks down crying in front of the fridge for no clear reason. This emotional roller coaster brings guilt, because deep down, you know you don't want to hurt anyone, but you also feel completely out of control. And that guilt morphs into a kind of chronic sadness that's hard to put into words. No one sees it, but you're slowly burning out inside. There are also days when you just don't want to talk to anyone, and it's not because you're angry at the world, it's because you feel a deep need for silence. To not have to explain, to not have to pretend, but because we've been taught to please, to smile, to be the strong one, you end up dragging yourself through the day, forcing yourself to join in on conversations you don't care about, taking on tasks that leave you empty. And all of that builds an internal pressure that eventually bursts. Sometimes as an angry outburst, sometimes as tears in the car, sometimes as an overwhelming sense of emptiness that seems to come out of nowhere. What makes it worse is that most people around you don't get it. From the outside, what they see is a woman who's acting weird, who gets upset for no reason, who cries at anything, who's bouncing from high to low without warning, and instead of support, what you often get is distance. Comments like, "Must be that time of the month," or "You're being oversensitive again." And even if they don't mean harm, it stings. It stings because it minimizes a reality you're living with brutal intensity. It stings because it makes you feel like what you're experiencing isn't valid. It stings because it leaves you feeling misunderstood, alone in the chaos. But here's something that rarely gets said, and it's important you hear it. You don't have to be who you were before. You're not here to preserve your old self at any cost. You're changing, and part of that means learning to look at your emotions differently, not as enemies trying to ruin your day, but as signals. Signals that your body and your mind are going through a deep internal reset. It's like a volcano erupting. It might seem like destruction, but it's also how new land is formed. Your mood swings aren't flaws. They're inner movements that need to be understood, not suppressed. And yes, there are days when the irritability hits so hard, even you're surprised. Like a spark sets everything off in seconds. Everything annoys you. Everything grates on your nerves. And of course, after that comes the guilt. But the only way to break that cycle is to understand where it's coming from. To realize you're not being difficult. Your nervous system is responding to an imbalance that needs attention. It's not about willpower. It's not about being more positive. It's about recognizing that you're in a life stage that calls for new tools, a different pace, a gentler way of treating yourself. Looking after your mental health during menopause isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And even if the world keeps telling you you're being dramatic, you know there are days when you feel like you'll explode if you don't get a break. So take it. Give yourself that space. Sometimes that means switching off your phone for a few hours, or saying no to an invitation that just doesn't feel right. Or letting yourself cry without feeling like you're failing, as a mum, as a partner, as a professional, because you're not failing, you're feeling. You're moving through a stage where everything is shifting inside, and that deserves to be lived with respect and without shame. Would you like us to keep talking about these things that hardly anyone dares to say out loud? Then don't go just yet. What's coming next might just give you a brand new way to support yourself emotionally through all of this.